This is Tim, and this is Deconstructing Comics. Welcome to Deconstructing Comics. This is Tim in Tokyo. This week a talk with Box Brown, whose new graphic novel Tetris is coming out next month. We'll talk about the history of the electronic game Tetris and why Box was inspired to make this book, his earlier comics biography of Andre the Giant, his publishing company, his development as a writer, and more. First, if you're planning to buy some comics or anything else on Amazon, get there via deconstructingcomics.com/Amazon and make that your bookmark for future purchases. We'll then get a percentage of what you spend. It costs you nothing extra and helps us cover web hosting and the other costs of presenting this show every week. Okay, so I'm talking with Box Brown, who is in Philadelphia, right?
Yes.
Yes, how's it going?
Good.
Box is just putting out, well, it's going to be out in October, a book about the computer game Tetris, and before that he had a graphic novel on Andre the Giant. But before we get into all that, so what comics did you read when you were growing up?
Lots of different stuff, I guess. I had like an Iron Man subscription when I was a kid, but I loved Calvin and Hobbes. I used to get like those books all the time. And then when I got into my teenage years, I was got super into the Life in Hell comics, which are, Matt Groening's comics before he did The Simpsons.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what drew you into actually making comics?
I was before I started making comics, I was always a very creative person, and I would do all these different kind of half-assed creative endeavors where I wrote half of a novel. I used to make some music, really stupid music, and comedy, performance art type stuff, but nothing ever really serious at all, no kind of serious pursuit. And then when I liked to draw and stuff, but I kind of had stopped. I only kind of just doodled and stuff forever. I kind of stopped taking drawing seriously when I was 12. And so I would just doodle and stuff when I was supposed to be taking notes in class when I was in college. And then it wasn't until I was about 25 that I started drawing comics seriously and started drawing at all, was because I read the James Kachalka comic, American Elf, and that was the first comic I ever read that was about real life. I don't know, it was just something clicked that I was wow, you can make a comic about anything. I was stuck in the idea that you'd have to make a comic about superheroes or whatever. I didn't understand the concept. Hadn't before that heard the concept of a reality comic in it. And something about American Elf also was so when webcomics, when webcomics were new, and it was it was easy to some sort of artwork that was something that I felt like I could do. And it was really deceivingly simple, but it was enough to get me started. You know what I mean?
Okay, yeah, and you did a comic online called Bellin?
Yeah, for a long time.
What was that about?
Well, not for that long. It was my first few years of making comics. It was my webcomic strip that was about it was a relationship comic, kind of about a couple.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That whatever. It was my first attempt at anything, when I was first really just getting started. I did I want to say 700 strips or something like that.
Wow.
But yeah.
Is that still available anywhere? Is that online or in a book or something?
I have it as a pay what you want digital, like an ebook with all the strips in it.
Okay, so from your website?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, looking at your Wikipedia page, it seems like 2011 was a pretty big year for you. That you got a Xeric grant when they were still doing that. And then you also had a Kickstarter to start a publisher. And Retrofit Comics, I wanted to ask you about that. So what was the purpose of starting Retrofit Comics?
So Retrofit Comics was I was self-publishing my own stuff, and had a subscription deal for my readers. So people would subscribe to my comics, and I would send them out like, I'd probably like 4 times a year I would send out comics to people. And I thought that maybe if I could do this subscription thing where I was sending out comics every month, and I thought I could turn that into like a business and make it like my part-time job because I was doing other part-time jobs and stuff. Like I was delivering pizza and things like that, and I thought that I could turn that into like a side business. And plus, it's also, I see it as like a creative endeavor for me, because I just love making comics, and I love when I see sometimes when I see comics, I like them so much that I want to be part of it, And I like designing books and the whole aspect of it. Like, it's all stuff that I learned self-publishing, but I really enjoy that aspect of it, and editing and all of the stuff. Anyway, so it kind of turned into a business eventually, but when I got Big Planet Books involved, or Big Planet Comics, but it's never been a hugely successful part-time job or anything. I mean, it's almost a full-time job work-wise, but it's never been like a big, huge moneymaker. I've always been really proud of all of the books we've done. We've won a bunch of Ignatz Awards, and been nominated every year that we've been in existence.
Yeah, so now Retrofit is putting out other people's comics, right? And your comics are coming out from First Second, but
yeah. I occasionally, like, my fiction comics usually come out via Retrofit, but yeah. So
I see. Now the website says that they're all staple-bound comics, high quality staple-bound comics. So are they like relatively short books then? Are they like saddle stapled?
So, yeah, that was like our big thing when we first got started, especially. And it's still like, I still want to keep Retrofit as a home for like shorter works that don't really, it's harder to publish that stuff nowadays because of the graphic novel. So it started out all like that. It was all like zines and stuff. But lately we've been doing more stuff with spines. Still relatively short, though.
I see. Now, are they like hand assembled or?
No, we have a printer.
Okay. Okay. So if someone wants to publish a comic, or how does a comic get put out by Retrofit? Do people submit things, or how does that work?
People do submit stuff, but it's mostly I kind of like I kind of look at it as like a season every year, and try to find a bunch of artists that I want to work with, and I kind of keep my eyes open all year round for people that I want to work with and stuff like that.
I see. So you might scout people out then.
Yeah, it's a creative endeavor for me, so I'm just really looking for people that I want to work with.
I see. Yeah, so the Tetris book, I found it on NetGalley, and then I thought, then I contacted you like a few months ago about doing this, and we delayed it until closer to the release of the book. And so in the meantime, I thought, well, I'll read something else of his. So I found the Andre the Giant graphic novel from 2014. Now, I was never really into pro wrestling, and actually, I think now that they're sort of upfront about it being fake, that sort of makes it more interesting to me. Did you grow up watching wrestling?
Yeah, definitely. When I started watching it when I was a kid.
Okay, yeah, I thought you must have been interested in it. Otherwise, why do
Sure.
this? But yes, I realize though Andre's been gone over 20 years now. So maybe
Yeah.
for younger listeners, fill us in on who he was.
So Andre the Giant was a pro wrestler and an actor. I think his most famous thing is probably being the giant in The Princess Bride.
Yeah, that's where I mainly know him from. I saw that movie I rented the video like 30 years ago.
Sure, yeah. So that's probably his most well-known stuff. But he was a big star in the 70s and 80s. And I was attracted to his story because he was also, his condition that made him a giant also made him, an outcast in a way, and a disabled in a way. So I thought his story was amazing in that and kind of sad because he felt so alienated.
Right, yeah, and then this condition, I'm not even sure how to pronounce it, acromegaly?
Acromegaly, yeah.
Acromegaly.
Yeah.
So it's like he just kept growing, and that is hard on your body after a certain point. So, yeah, and there's a scene in the book where he like just gets up in the morning and just turns his ankle and it breaks.
Yeah, he put his weight on right on his ankle, and then they had to, there was no story. There was no story about him just getting out of his bed and breaking his ankle. So what they did was they said that Killer Khan broke his ankle, another wrestler, and then so after after it was fixed, he came back and he got revenge on Killer Khan, and they had matches all up and down for a year. Him getting his revenge for his ankle.
I see. Yeah, it shows too much weakness, I guess, if you just break your ankle getting out of bed.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and the other thing that kind of stood out to me was that as a kid, in France he met Samuel Beckett.
Yeah. So Samuel Beckett lived down the street from him. I was actually went out to lunch not that long ago, earlier this year, with Andre's nephew. And he showed me on a map like how close Samuel Beckett used to live to them. It's like really, really close, like right down the street.
Yeah, and so Samuel Beckett gives him a ride to school, and he's saying like, "Oh yeah, I write some plays, and they're a little bit famous."
He doesn't. And Andre couldn't care less.
Yeah. Yeah, so I actually was looking up Samuel Beckett. So I guess he was from Ireland, but he lived in France.
Yeah, in Moulin, France. It's a little tiny town.
Okay. Yeah, so Tetris. So I wasn't really sure what to expect when I found it. I mean, of course, we've all played the game. I guess I wasn't prepared for there to be quite such a complex story behind it.
Yeah.
So what was your inspiration for doing this book?
So I had seen the documentary about Tetris, and which goes over this crazy history as well. And also, I remember when I was a kid that there was two versions of Tetris, right? And there was there was two Nintendo versions. There was like the Nintendo Tetris, and then but a year before that, a version of Tetris had already come out that was in this weird black cartridge that didn't look like any of the other video games. And I remember as a kid, I had one cousin who was like super into games and stuff, and I remember him being like, "Yeah, see that the black version of Tetris is illegal now," and being like, "Whoa!" Like fascinated at that age, like as a kid.
Contraband games, wow.
Yeah, I was like, "Whoa!" But it's funny to me, like, how did he even know that? Because it was like, years before the internet. Like, this was like, how did rumors even get out about that stuff?
Mm.
But anyway, so then it led me to take a look at the Tetris story, which is amazing, but not just the weird negotiation of the story, of the game and the rights to all that. The thing that was amazing about it to me was that it was created without any concern for profitability. There was no time when Alexei Pajitnov was making the game, he wasn't sitting there thinking about, oh, this is going to be some big, huge computer game hit. I'm going to be, submit this to Nintendo. I'm going to send this to, he wasn't thinking about any of that stuff at all. He was just like trying to come up with something cool and out of like pure inspiration,
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, that's kind of, it's kind of like a metaphor for all, art and the way art interacts with commerce and becomes a product in a game, and how it affects the artist's life. Alexei, the story of Tetris is a really extreme version of that story, but it's something that happened. I think it happens to all artists. A lot of artists understand what that's like.
Yeah, well, plus even if he wants to make money from it, he kind of can't because he's doing it at his Soviet Union government job, and they step in and start negotiating the rights.
I mean, if he had attempted to sit there and be like, start selling Tetris on the side, he could have been thrown in jail. It'd be like selling drugs or anything else or anything. You couldn't sell stuff, and you couldn't start a little business for yourself. That was not allowed.
Yeah, and so you start out with a scene of Alexei and Vlad, like, before the game is developed, and then you get into this kind of exploration of the evolution of games and where they came from. And I wanted to ask you about this one place. So you said, but games aren't just sport plus art. It's not a simple equation. Animals like to play, and they begin at a young age. Then on the next page, the wrestler, the competitor, the child, the player merged into something new by the artist. Gaming began in the artist's mind. The artist made the ideas manifest. They birthed gaming into the world, and we became players. And I felt like those two pages points are a little bit in conflict with each other. So I guess if it's not just sport plus art, I wasn't quite sure what it is, because the next page sort of suggested to me it was sport plus art.
Well, I mean, that's one way to look at it, but I don't think it's a simple. It's more than the sum of its parts, right? So it's an experience that is not necessarily just competition, right? I mean, you play a game not necessarily just to compete with the person next to you. You do it to experience it, and in some ways, the same way we experience all types of art. You know what I mean? I think that what I meant there was that games aren't just the combination of competition and a painting. There's all kinds of comings and goings that come about when you play games and when you create games and when you think of new ways to kind of mess with the player or to make things more difficult. I think it's like it can be very complex experience of. And if you think of games as an art form, it's a really complex artistic experience. In the way, if you compare it to the way that some person would experience, say, a painting or sculpture or something like that, gaming can be much more. You're much more involved.
Right, yeah, you can spend much, much more time on it than most people do on any particular work of art.
But not just the time. I mean, you are involved in it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you are really a part of it. Like, it doesn't really exist without you.
Mm-hmm. Coming up, the crazy story of the fight for the rights to Tetris, Box's development as a full-length book writer, his tools and hopes for future work, and more. But first, if you value the content on Deconstructing Comics, Critiquing Comics, and To the Bat Polls, if these shows have helped you get a new perspective on something or to discover something new, help us keep going with a monthly donation via Patreon at patreon.com/deconcomics. If everyone listening gave just $3 a month, it would make a big difference. We'd be able to reach several of our Patreon goals and bring you more content. And if you're making a comic and give $3 or more per month, we'll include an ad for your comic in the show once a month. Like John Alley, he's currently working on a comic called The Non-Scene, which we discussed in the June 29th, 2015 episode of Critiquing Comics. John writes, it's a story about a girl who learns to see invisible creatures by reading a mysterious book, more or less suitable for all ages. Find it at airbornecactus.com/comics.
This is an imaginary podcast, which may never have happened,
The Shortbox Showcase.
but then again may have, about a father and daughter. I'm Professor Allen,
And I'm Emily.
who came from Ohio and talked about comics.
Walking Dead,
Tintin,
Black Lightning.
White Tiger. It tells of their rise to glory, when the great guests were yet to be booked,
Let's put it this way, Shogun Warriors wasn't going to win any Eisners.
and the great feats of editing not yet performed,
This is Ultra 7, this is Ultraman Jack, and this Ultraman Taro, and this Ultraman Leo, and this
of how they spoke at length,
This continuity is really the brainchild of nitpicking nerds the world over.
But to be fair, the best kind of confession is the Force confession.
and reviewed in brief tales that explore creatively the bounds of a given character's history,
Red Sun is wonderful with a very strange ending.
of brilliant creators before their fall from grace. This is the era where Miller is at the height of his creative and artistic powers, and the ability of strong writing to encapsulate and transcend its time.
Flash of Two Earths by Gardner Fox.
This is an imaginary podcast. Aren't they all? Shortbox Showcase is part of the Relatively Geeky family of podcasts. Check us out on the web at relativelygeekypodcast.blogspot.com or search in iTunes for Relatively Geeky or Shortbox Showcase. And remember, we're not experts.
We're just family.
And then you get into the history of Nintendo. And that company, of course, resurfaces like later in the book when Tetris shows up on the Game Boy. And so that was pretty interesting. I mean, I live in Japan. I know something about Nintendo, but I didn't know quite everything that was there. I mean, of course, it starts much, long before computer games. It was just making card games. So that was interesting. So now, tell us about this battle for the rights for Tetris, because I'm not sure if I can even explain it.
Okay, so what happens is, the game gets sent out to another. So Alexei created it in a kind of like a scientific university type setting. It wasn't a university, but that type of setting where it's you're there to these were the people that created sent Sputnik up to space, right? Scientists. And so the game got sent to from that group to another group of scientists in Hungary. And the Hungarian computer scientists, they had other games, that they were looking to license. And they were, at this type of fair, like a convention type thing where you're going around looking at different games to figure out if you want to buy the international license for it. So this company in England bought the license, but it turned out like they didn't really Alexei was doing the negotiations themselves, and there was no kind of, they didn't really understand, like Alexei didn't understand how business really worked. He would get a fax in the mail, and that the company thought that it, was thinking that he was signing over the rights, but Alexei thought that he was just inviting them to come discuss signing over the rights.
Yeah, so that kind of blew my mind that they read so much into that, but
yeah, and it was so they just and then the European or the British company just went along and went for it, and assumed they had the license and made the computer version, and made a bunch of money.
And they start dealing out rights to other companies.
Yeah. So then that's what starts happening, and then. Well, one person, Hank Rogers, who ends up being kind of a hero in the story, ends up trying to get the rights from what is now they set up a Russian governmental company to deal with this stuff. As they start to transition towards the end of the Soviet Union, they're getting more and more involved in capitalism. So. Now they realize that, all right, this guy's been making all these games. He doesn't really have the rights, and they're trying to, this guy's here and he represents Nintendo. Then there was another guy, and all these people trying to get the real, actual, legal rights to this game, because in a way, the original company was, they just went and did it, but then it's like possession's 9/10 of the law, and so it ends up being there's. 3 companies trying to get the rights to this game. It ends up being settled by a judge in California. But it was hairy there for a second. If things didn't go the right way, some of those people in Russia could have ended up, in the gulag or punished in some way, in jail probably, and Alexei could have ended up in jail. As it was, after all this negotiation, Alexei, the creator of the game, didn't even get any of the profits of the game. Even during the biggest years of it, in Game Boy, when they sold millions and millions and millions of cartridges of Tetris, he was not, legally, he didn't have any right to that money. So that was another tragedy too, in a way.
Yeah.
And you have to think about, like, as Americans, kind of, and capitalists, you think about that and you're like, that's the worst thing in the world. He lost all this money. But Alexei at first wasn't thinking about it that way. It was so foreign to him. And I think that's what makes the story so unique, especially to people, American readers. And the way video games are now, because it has become, since it was big business then, but since then, video games is a bigger industry than film. It's in a way, it's the most popular art form in the world. So that was big too. That's changed a lot too.
Yeah, it was interesting how that once that Soviet ministry kind of takes over the negotiations, none of them really know what they're doing either. They just kind of have to act tough because they're not sure what else to do. They've never done that kind of thing.
Right, and they're learning as they're going, and Belikov, he does kind of he's a really interesting character in the book too, who he was under a lot of pressure, and he kind of got lucky, and he was really smart, and he ended up saving his own ass and saving the game, the rights to the game, and all that stuff.
Yeah, well, that's there's that one scene that it feels like something out of like a sitcom or something, where he's got that government guy. What was his name?
Belikov?
Yeah, so he's got meetings with the 2 different Western guys from different game companies, and then the third one shows up unannounced, all on the same day.
He went back and made changes on to contractual stuff that were ridiculous to so people would, so the person he was negotiating with would pay attention to these big changes and not notice the small change. It's really like fascinating how they came. I mean, you know, if they were schooled in business, this is probably stuff that they do that goes on in business all the time. But you know, they were just learning on their feet. It's really remarkable.
Mm-hmm. So, how did you do the research for this book?
So there's a lot of, you know, I actually had them put up because there's a bibliography to the book that got left out of the first edition.
Yeah, I was wondering. The version I have, there's no bibliography. Andre has one, but...
Yeah, it got left out of the first edition. So we are putting it up on the website, and it'll be back in the second edition.
Okay.
So, yeah. So there's... basically, there's a lot of different books and art. There's a million things that have been written about Tetris, you know, over the years. And there's a documentary, too. But a lot of the actual history goes... a book called Game Over, which came out in 1993, which has a few sections about Tetris in it, and even the documentary, which has interviews with all the people in it too. I think they kind of pull from that book as well. And then like every other book about video games or anything that mentions Tetris all goes back to that book Game Over, which came out in 1993. So yeah, I mean, I had to double check on stuff. I was able to get like the court records and things like that. I was able to talk to some people involved.
Who did you talk to? Who did you get to interview?
I got to talk to Gilman Louie, who was involved with Tetris way back in the beginning. I talked to him recently, and now he's working with Niantic, the Pokemon Go people. Yeah. So yeah, him, and then I talked to, you know, there's a section about how the brain works with Tetris, and I talked to a neurologist about who had studied Tetris and how the brain reacts, why Tetris is so addicting, what makes it addicting. So yeah, it was a lot of you know, anything that I could see or read about Tetris or interviews with these people. I was watching it and reading it.
Well, I was glad to find that I wasn't the only person to experience the Tetris effect. Where even after you stop playing the game, you still see shapes falling.
Yeah, it is. It's a visual hallucination, right? I remember like trying to go to bed and shutting my eyes and still seeing the Tetris pieces falling nonstop.
Yeah, well, I mean, I first found out about the game, I think it was about 1990. I was here in Japan, and the English school I was working at got a copy. Somebody gave it to the head of the school on a floppy disk. And then there were several different versions that came in, and one of them it was like a Tetris game on the left side, and then as you reach certain point levels on the right side, there was this girl who gradually lost her clothing. Although she was really badly drawn, but...
Yeah.
And so I used to, you know, between students, I'd sit and play it and then, you know, go home and it'd still be like shapes falling.
It's funny. Recently I got the iPhone version of Tetris, which you can play with one finger now. You know, there's just like they figured out a way to, you know, it makes it easy to play with just one finger. And you all of a sudden you'll sit down and play it, and then 20-30 minutes have gone by, and it's like you didn't even like, I'll just play Tetris, whatever. And then all of a sudden it just goes. You just can't not keep doing it.
Yeah, well, I mean, reading the book, I felt like, in order to prepare for this interview, I should play Tetris.
Well, I definitely, when I first started, the idea of maybe doing this book, I was like, I don't know. I mean, like, I haven't with Andre, I mean, I've kind of in a way dedicated my whole life to pro wrestling, but I was like, I only played Tetris for so long. And then I was like, well, I played 10,000 hours of Tetris, no doubt, you know, on many different platforms. So I think that I played just as much Tetris
So
as anyone.
you put in your time, so
Yeah, definitely.
now reading both of these books, I noticed. I mean, the Andre book is interesting, and I liked it. I don't want to take anything away from it, but I felt like that book seemed to be like a succession of anecdotes, where the Tetris book feels much more kind of a through line, all the way through, flowing through it. I think partly because the the saga of the rights takes a long time to tell. There's no way around it. But also, I think it all got tied together a little because you did more with like thematic aspect of it, like where did games come from, and the intersection of competition and art. So of the two, I think the Tetris is the stronger book.
Yeah, Andre was my first book. And, it was the longest work I had ever done up to that point, and I think, I'm trying. I think I learned a few things about making a longer work. It's difficult, but I'm glad to hear that. I mean, I like to think that it's getting better every time.
Yeah, well, if the new book is better, you're going in the right direction then.
Right.
Like, no, I like the old one better. The new one,
Yeah.
not so much. No. Now, are you doing comics full time now?
Yeah. When I'm not, I pretty much do comics all the time.
Okay, so no other day job, no more pizza delivery.
No, I haven't delivered pizza in a couple years now.
Okay, that's good. Do you appear at many conventions?
I'll be around a lot for this Tetris book. I'll be New York Comic Con and a whole bunch of cities in the U.S. and the U.K. For the book tour. I'll be at Small Press Expo next weekend. Well, actually, I don't know when this is going to be airing, but that's coming up. But I usually do I'm used to doing the small press conventions. So like New York Comic Con is it's way, way, way bigger than I'm used to doing. So yeah, I've been there once. I did a signing there, but this year I have a couple of panels. I have a bunch of different events to go to. So it's going to be overwhelming for me.
Okay, and New York. What are the dates of New York Comic Con?
New York Comic Con is like October 7th, 8th, 9th, that weekend. And then the book comes out on October 11th. So.
Okay, yeah. So when this comes out, that's still like a couple weeks off. So. Okay. So what are your drawing tools generally?
I've used about only a few different types of pens. I use the Micron 08, and I use a Pentel Pocket brush pen, and that's about it. Pencils. I use like a hard pencil, like a 3H.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you're doing everything on paper and then.
Then I scan it, and then I have a tablet that I work with to kind of like clean up all the pages and color with.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So yeah.
Kind of like a Frankenstein's monster of a little bit of real stuff, a little bit of digital stuff, a little bit of both.
Okay. Yeah, that's actually, the Andre book was just black and white, but now you got a little bit of color. You got some yellow in the Tetris along with the black. So, what kind of comic that you've never done would you like to do?
I really would love to one day do a fiction graphic novel. I've done a lot of fictional work that's shorter, like maybe 50 pages maximum. But I would like to do a longer book one day of fiction stuff. It's super difficult to get. Fiction's. I love it so much, but maybe my stories are kind of weird. But I like it. I like them being weird, and but they're not as marketable as the nonfiction stuff, I think.
Why is that?
It's like Tetris has a natural appeal. People
Mm-hmm.
know about it, and when it's fiction, you got to get people going all the way through and it's all you, all based on stuff that they've never heard of before, and you have to. I don't know. It's a harder sell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, that's kind of what I was thinking too. Yeah, like with Andre or Tetris, there are a lot of people already know that subject, and okay, I'm in. But yeah, if
Yeah,
it's something with brand new characters, then yeah, you really have to sell them on it.
yeah.
Um,
My fiction stuff too is more like tone poems and character, character dissections rather than traditional 3-act stories ever.
mm.
So that's might be I don't know. I don't care. I still like it. I like that. I like weird work, and I like stuff that's not necessarily a 3-act myth of the hero.
Hmm. Is there a genre that you like to read but you can't picture yourself working on?
Yeah, I mean, like I really like. I really don't do. I mean, I had that comic that was about a relationship comic, but like I really don't. Since then, like I guess I got it out of my system. I'm not really doing into romance or relationship comics. That's not really something I could see myself doing anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I just got that. When I was doing that, I was in my 20s, and that was like the hugest thing on my mind all the time. It's like I have a little bit different stuff going on now. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like I could try anything
Mm-hmm.
and have fun with it.
Okay. What could be done in comics that hasn't been done yet?
Oh,
Anything?
I don't know. I mean, I think that comics is, and I think I was thinking about this earlier today that maybe when I first got started in comics, I feel like, and before that, there was like a stylistic standard maybe for what comics were supposed to be. And ink and paper. That was like the dominant medium. And now I couldn't really tell you that the dominant. If I'm all the comics that I read, I couldn't say that the dominant medium people work in is ink. It's definitely not the case anymore. The people working digitally, people working in pencil, people working in things that look like pencil or paintings or all these different ways to color with markers and things like that. And if you look at how style has exploded in the last decade with the way all the different things people are now accepting as comics, I think we're still, relatively confined, but I think that it's lately been good. I mean, I think people are making more different types of comics with more different types of media, and that's good.
Yes. Okay. How do you think the comics industry will change in the next, let's say, 5 years?
I hope the graphic novel, and it seems to be that the book world is still responding strongly to comics, and my hope would be that we reach the point where comics in North America, English-speaking comics, are as popular as manga is in Japan, where it's people of all age groups, and it's really widely read. I mean, I think we're moving in that direction, and things are getting more diverse all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that hopefully we'll be even more in that direction.
Yeah, well, like I went to Mocha last spring, and yeah, I mean, there are so many, like people in their 20s and 30s of all different, backgrounds, racial backgrounds, genders, sexual orientations, who are, making all kinds of different comics. So yeah, it's
Yeah,
definitely
and,
a wider range.
The younger kids now have had all different influences now because, and that'll just keep growing as it goes. People will keep building on that.
Yes.
I love the fact that comics aren't just black and white or just ink and color. Now there's all different media, and everything looks different. It doesn't have to be anything exact. It doesn't. There doesn't have to be a standard comic book lettering or something like that anymore. It could be anything and look and be good and be worthwhile.
Mm-hmm. Or a standard comic book genre type of story. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of people, older people maybe, still think comics equal superheroes, but you go to Mocha, that ain't the case.
Yeah, most definitely.
Okay, well, good luck with this book, and thanks so much for your time.
Oh, thank you for having me on.
Tetris, The Games People Play by Box Brown is published by First Second. It's out October 11th, but you can pre-order now. If you buy from Amazon, please get there from deconstructingcomics.com/Amazon or click the handy link in the show notes of this episode at deconstructingcomics.com. You can write us at mail@deconstructingcomics.com or look us up on Patreon, Twitter, Tumblr, Facebook, and YouTube. All our social media links can be found on the right sidebar at deconstructingcomics.com. Also, please give us a review on iTunes or Stitcher. Our theme is from bensound.com. Last Thursday, right here in this podcast feed, we released a new edition of our spin-off podcast, Critiquing Comics, where Mulele and I critique comics by listeners. If you're looking for some constructive feedback on your comic, send it to us at mail@deconstructingcomics.com. And please try to keep it to about 30 pages. This coming Thursday on To the Bat Polls, we'll talk about Cliff Robertson as Shane. A serviceable story, but is its theme a bit schizophrenic? Plus some bat trivia and your mail. Look up To the Bat Polls wherever you find your podcasts, or at tothebatpolls.libsyn.com. One other thing about our Patreon page, I've made some changes to our goals. The first goal is $150. At that level, I'll make available the first 2.5 years of Deconstructing Comics, over 120 episodes that are currently missing from our website. We'd really appreciate it if everyone pitched in a few bucks a month to get us to that $150 a month level and make that happen, the release of the old episodes. Next week, Irene Strikalski is back. She's been on several times before, including in episode 429 when she was here in Tokyo talking with Mulele and me. Her comics career has taken several steps forward since we last talked with her, including some work for Marvel. So be here for an Irene update next week. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.